Okay, so get this. 2 million copies in just 12 days.
Wow.
For Clair Obscur. Expedition 33. I mean, that's not just good, that's huge. It's blowing past expectations, even, leaving some established JRPG giants kind of looking over their shoulder sales-wise.
That kind of speed, yeah, it really makes you sit up and take notice. It's not just hype, is it? It's just the game is really hitting a nerve, connecting with what players are actually looking for right now.
Exactly my thinking. And that's what we're doing today, a deep dive into this whole Clair Obscur phenomenon. We really want to unpack what's making it click so well, both with players and the critics too.
That's good. What are we drawing on?
We've got quite a mix. Articles from places like Forbes, CNET, GamesIndustry.biz, The Gamer, GamesRadar, GameGrin, analysis from Alinea Analytics as well.
Okay.
Plus, we're looking at the player side YouTube reviews from GamerRanks and SmashJT, a more in-depth look from SavePath. Oh, and this really interesting Reddit discussion. It even has comments from the game's director in there.
Oh, cool. Direct from the source.
Yeah. So our mission really is to figure out the key ingredients here. We'll look at the gameplay, the story, how it was made. That development story is pretty interesting itself, and, what it all might mean for gaming going forward.
Right. Basically trying to understand what makes a game truly grab people and succeed like this in, let's face it, a pretty crowded market today.
Okay, let's start with the world itself. What pulls you in? Clair Obscur drops you into this dark fantasy world, but it has this really distinct Belle Époque aesthetic. Think Paris, but twisted, dreamlike, unsettling.
And there's this central horror, right, the Gamache.
Yeah, this yearly event where basically anyone over a certain age just vanishes. And every year, these expeditions form, volunteers heading out to confront the source, this figure called the Paintress.
In the main city, Lumiere. It's basically a devastated Paris, isn't it? Nature taking back the streets. That image alone sets a powerful tone.
Loss, but also resilience.
Oh.
Totally. And these yearly expeditions, they feel almost like a ritual sacrifice, but also fueled by this desperate hope.
Yeah.
It speaks to that idea of fighting on even when things look bleak.
Yeah, that hope against overwhelming odds thing.
Yeah.
And the narrative tone itself sounds unique.
It really does. It's not super cheerful JRPG optimism, but it's also not just wallowing in misery. The characters, they get how bad things are. Someone described them as fluent in despair, which I thought was great. But they keep going. They have these mantras like, for those who come after and tomorrow comes. It captures that mix of realism about the darkness, but also this stubborn refusal to give up. Apparently, the story shifts between these moments of awe at the weird, beautiful world, and then bam, these really harsh, brutal moments.
So it sounds like it's aiming for maybe a more mature emotional response.
Yeah.
Not shying away from the tough stuff, but still finding that thread of perseverance. Okay, so how does that translate into actually playing the game? The combat's getting a lot of attention.
Right. It's a hybrid. Fundamentally, it's turn-based, which a lot of JRPG fans love. Strategy, planning your moves.
Okay.
But then it layers in real-time actions. When an enemy attacks, you can try to dodge. Okay, that reduces damage. But the really interesting part, the bit getting compared to Dark Souls or Elden Ring, is the parry.
Ah, the parry.
Yeah. If you time it perfectly against an enemy's entire combo, you get this huge counterattack. Reviews say it's tight timing on normal difficulty. Bosses can be, quote, brutal.
But they have difficulty options, right?
They do. So it's not designed to just wall people out. You get that strategic depth, but also these intense skill-based moments.
That's fascinating, taking that parry mechanic, which you usually find in pure action games like Sekiro, and weaving it into a turn-based structure. It must make mastering fights feel really earned. It's not just picking commands, it's execution too.
Exactly. And it adds another layer because each party member has their own unique stuff going on, Gustav uses charge attacks, lightning-based. Lune is a mage who puts elemental stains on enemies to make her spells hit harder later. Mael, the fencer, switches combat stances with her skills.
So it's not just different stats, they actually play differently. You have to think about how they work together.
Right, finding those synergies. And visually, in combat.
Yeah, I heard about the Persona vibes.
Totally. Stylish menus, the camera work is apparently really dynamic. One dev mentioned they deliberately added tiny camera moves with almost every button press just to give it energy.
Keep it from feeling static.
Yeah, it all feeds into that Souls-like turn-based combat label people are using. Challenging, needs precision, but feels good when you nail it.
Okay, and beyond the moment-to-moment combat, there's the Picto system for progression.
Right. Pictos are like attachments, gear pieces. They give you big stat boosts, special perks. But the cool part is the more you use a Picto, you build up Luminina for it, which basically lets you make that Picto even better over time. So it encourages you to stick with gear you like and build around it, not just constantly swapping for the next slightly higher number. More nuanced builds.
Sounds like a solid system for customization. Any downsides mentioned?
The main one seems to be the UI for managing all the Pictos. Apparently it can get a bit cluttered, maybe a little overwhelming to navigate with so many options.
Fair enough, that can happen with deep systems. Now, one thing that seems different from a lot of modern RPGs is the story is pretty linear.
Yeah, that's the word. It's not an open world game where you make huge choices that change everything. It follows a set path, mostly.
Which isn't necessarily bad. It lets them control the pacing, the emotional hits, much more tightly. And that French novel inspiration, La Horde du Contrevent.
Right, the horde of the counterwind.
Yeah, that's about a group on this relentless journey against this constant, powerful wind. You can totally see the parallel with the expeditions against the Paintress. Creates this strong sense of forward momentum, pushing against fate, almost.
And the world itself, beyond Lumiere, sounds incredible.
Oh yeah. The landscapes, warped by this fracture event, described as totally surreal but beautiful. Floating islands, weird architecture, fused with nature. Even though it's a world touched by death, there's this constant sense of visual wonder. One reviewer said they took, like, hundreds of screenshots.
Wow. That visual artistry must really sell the atmosphere, that sublime feeling you mentioned. And speaking of atmosphere, the soundtrack.
Getting rave reviews? Absolutely fantastic, seems to be the consensus. Lorien Testard is the composer.
Okay.
It's apparently super diverse. Emotional stuff, intense battle music, and it features French vocals, Alice Duport-Percier and Victor Borba. People hear echoes of composers like Keiichi Okabe from Nier or Nobuo Uematsu from Final Fantasy, but it definitely has its own unique sound.
Using leitmotifs, too. Recurring themes.
Yeah, apparently they use those really effectively to underline key story moments and character arcs. It sounds like the music is just completely woven into the experience, not just background dressing.
A great soundtrack can make such a huge difference, especially for a game like this. Okay, let's shift gears. The team behind the game. This isn't your typical AAA story, is it?
Not at all. This huge hit was made by a core team of, about 30 people in-house? Maybe 80 total, including contractors?
Yeah, something like that.
That
Tiny compared to the hundreds, sometimes thousands, working on big AAA titles. What kind of advantage does that give them, you think?
Well, the studio head, Guillaume Broche, he came from Ubisoft, right?
Yeah, and apparently left because he was bored, which kind of hints at wanting something more agile, maybe more creatively direct.
Makes sense. And the really wild part is that a lot of the core team didn't have prior game dev experience.
I know. That's kind of amazing. Building a game this polished with newcomers. What does that say about their hiring or their process?
It suggests they were looking for passion and maybe raw talent over just resumes. Maybe left constrained by how things are usually done, and how they found people was pretty interesting too.
Super unconventional. The lead writer found her through an online voice acting audition she applied for.
Seriously?
Yeah. And the composer, Lorien Testard, found him on SoundCloud.
Wow. So just scouring the internet for talent, it really speaks to how you can find amazing people outside the usual channels these days. And their work process was key too, right? Agile.
Yeah, they used Scrum. Breaking work into short sprints, daily check-ins, planning, reviews, that whole iterative cycle.
Which can be way more flexible and faster, especially for a smaller team, compared to the sometimes slow, bureaucratic structures you find in huge studios. Lets you pivot quickly if something isn't working.
That agility probably helped them punch above their weight. And they got noticed at high levels too, right?
Yeah, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, actually gave them a shout out, congratulated them on Instagram, called the game an example of French creativity and boldness.
That's pretty big validation. And how did they fund it all?
It was a mix. They got a loan from the French government, which is interesting, plus funding from their publisher, Kepler Interactive. And Namco helped with the physical copies.
So a combination of support, not tied just to one big corporate entity.
Exactly, which likely gave them a good degree of creative freedom while still having the resources they needed. Okay, so let's tie this all back to those incredible sales numbers.
Right. Over 2 million copies in 12 days, breaking that down. Over 785,000 on Steam. Over 350K on PlayStation. And then there's Game Pass.
Yeah, over 1.3 million players on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. That's huge exposure.
What does that Game Pass number really mean, though? It's not direct sales.
True, but it's massive for word of mouth. Think about it. 1.3 million people get to try it, talk about it, maybe stream it. Some of them will definitely buy it on other platforms or recommend it to friends who do. It fuels the fire. And those direct sales figures are still stunning, especially when you stack them against the big JRPGs.
Oh, yeah. On Steam, they said Clair Obscur was selling way faster initially than games like Persona 5 Royal, Persona 3, even Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, like 2 to 4 times faster in that launch window.
Now, okay, some of those are ports or remakes, so it's not a perfect comparison.
Sure, fair point.
But still, the velocity of Clair Obscur's sales is just undeniable. It clearly hit the ground running and tapped into something players wanted right now.
And it even went toe-to-toe with the Oblivion remaster, right?
Yeah, that was interesting. Oblivion maybe sold slightly more copies right at launch, but at one point, Clair Obscur actually had more people playing it concurrently on Steam.
Which suggests strong engagement, right? People weren't just buying it and putting it down. That word-of-mouth effect again.
Exactly. And it's not just sales. The reviews are fantastic.
Metacritic score of 92. That's definitely putting it in the Game of the Year conversation.
For sure. And we have to talk about the price.
$50. That feels like a big deal when new AAA games are hitting $70, sometimes more.
Absolutely. Offering something that looks and feels premium, but at a more accessible price point, that's a smart move in the current climate. People see it as great value.
And it sounds like it found a sweet spot in the JRPG market itself.
Yeah, analysts are pointing this out. It seems to have scratched an itch for a modern-looking, graphically impressive but fully turn-based RPG. Some players feel like series like Final Fantasy have moved more towards action RPGs.
Right, leaving a gap.
Exactly. And Clair Obscur stepped right into that gap for players wanting that traditional strategic turn-based combat loop, but with modern presentation. It shows they really understood a specific segment of the audience.
So, stepping back, what does all this success mean for the wider industry, do you think?
Honestly, I think it's a big dose of optimism. It shows that you don't necessarily need a colossal budget and a giant corporation behind you to make something high quality that resonates hugely with players. Smaller, passionate teams with a clear vision can absolutely compete.
Maybe even thrive. Does it point towards, like, a more sustainable way to make games?
It could. Sandfall might be showing a path there. It highlights that contrast, doesn't it? The agility of a small studio versus the potential inertia or risk aversion in AAA. Getting something truly different or ambitious greenlit in a huge company can be really tough, even for established names.
And players seem to appreciate the package itself, too. Single player, no microtransactions.
Oh, massively. In an era of live services and constant monetization pushes, just getting a complete, polished single-player adventure feels like a statement. Players notice that, and they appreciate not being nickel and dimed.
It really feels like they made the game they wanted to make, inspired by things they loved, not just chasing the latest trend.
And that authenticity shines through, doesn't it? A strong vision from the start, executed well by a dedicated team that understood its audience. That seems to be the core formula here.
Okay, so let's wrap this deep dive up. Clair Obscur, Expedition 33. Its success seems to come down to this mix of things. Really engaging, innovative combat, a unique, emotionally resonant story and world, a passionate, agile, smaller team that maybe wasn't afraid to bring in fresh talent, and this player-friendly approach with the pricing and no microtransactions. Plus, finding that sweet spot in the JRPG market.
It really does feel like a confluence of factors hitting just right, which leads to the big question, really, for you listening. Is this a blip, or is Clair Obscur's journey a sign of something bigger? Could we be seeing a shift where smaller, creatively led studios can genuinely challenge the giants more often?
Yeah, and what would that mean for the kinds of games we get? What can the big players learn from a hit like this that came, let's be honest, a bit out of left field for many?
Definitely something to think about.
We'd love to hear what you think about Clair Obscur. Whether you've played it, what stands out to you, or just your take on these industry trends, let us know. And hey, if you haven't checked it out yet, maybe this gave you a reason to consider your own expedition into Lumiere.